Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anita and this is Sewing Yogi and this is Friday Sews. Firstly, I just want to apologise for not being here last week. Lots of things happened. My husband had a holiday last week, so he was off work, and we did take a few days just to get stuff sorted in the house. We did actually go to see my dad, which was lovely. Really nice to see him after 18 months not seeing him. It was amazing. Had loads and loads of hugs with him, which is fantastic. They have actually moved, so we didn't have to travel as far as what we would have had to if he was still living where he was before. If you've seen any of my previous vlogs, I did mention my dad was living about 5.5 hours drive away, but now he's moved much closer in the past couple of weeks, and he now lives only an hour and a half away in the car, so much better. And the place he's moved to is beautiful, really gorgeous. He's moved to the Cotswolds, down in Cirencester, so it's beautiful. And we had a day there, and we stayed overnight in a beautiful B&B and had a beautiful meal. Treated my dad to a meal because he's lost loads of weight from the stress of moving and moving furniture. He did it all himself, bless him. I mean, he's 77 years old. Can't believe he moved most of the furniture on his own. Didn't get anyone to help him. But that's my dad all over. And so they both of them, him and his wife, have lost quite a lot of weight, I think, from the stress of it all. So we had a day out on the Wey Valley River, and we went up to a castle, Goodrich Castle, which was absolutely amazing. We love anything to do with castles or history or anything like that, so we had a fabulous day out there, and the weather wasn't too bad. It's not been that great here in the UK. And then I had my second vaccine on the Wednesday, and it completely knocked me out. So I wasn't particularly very ill. I was just hugely fatigued, very tired. I couldn't basically do anything. I was like a zombie. And it's only recently, I say past a couple of days, that I've started to feel a little bit better, but I'm still really tired. I just want to go to bed. Pretty much every couple of hours I think, oh, should I just go to bed and have a lie down, because I'm so tired. But today hasn't been too bad. I've managed to get some stuff done. Yeah, so anyway, to the point of what we're here for sewing. My Martha dress. I finished my Martha dress, and I'm going to give you just a little review of what I think of the Sew Over It Martha dress. I thought it would just take me, a couple of days, a week at the most. It just did take me a bit longer, I think perhaps because I was a bit tired having the jab, and yeah, just didn't quite get it finished. I had a few niggles with the pattern. Perhaps it was maybe just me, but yeah, I think it is quite a complex pattern. Now, if you've been sewing for a long time, then you're probably going to be completely fine with this pattern. If you're new to sewing, I would say maybe take your time with it. So if you wanted to have a go at it, I would, I'd never say to a beginner, don't give it a go, because I think, I would, if it's me, I'd just go for it. I'd just go for these things. Challenge yourself, that's what I would say. I'd say just read the instructions very carefully and take your time over doing each step. Some of them can be a little bit of a fiddle, I'd say. So starting off, here is my dress here. You may have seen it in the previous Friday Sews, where I had just got the bodice pieces together, and here is the finished item. So I absolutely adore this fabric, really love this fabric. It's beautiful. What can I say? It's just immensely summery. I just don't think anyone can go wrong with gingham, to be honest. I just love it so much. I've lined it or bagged it out with just a white, I think it's a kind of like a cotton voile fabric. Or voile, I never know how to say that, but yeah, I don't think it's, I'm not quite sure what that fabric is, but it's always the one that they have set out for lining. So yeah, it's very thin, very drapey. I thought it was be fine for that. I didn't have enough fabric to line it with the outer fabric, but then I didn't really want to do that anyway, because I wasn't sure whether you'd still be able to see the pattern repeat underneath and it kind of look a bit weird. And yeah, I'll come on to the fact that I didn't have enough fabric in a minute. But yeah, so I lined it with that, and yeah, all of the pieces come together really lovely. Everything lines up beautifully. You have a tie here, which is kind of like a pretend tie, but this front bit does open up like a flap. So I'll just undo it. The tie is huge as well. You have a lovely big tie on that. But you can see it just opens here like that, and that is enclosed. So it's not really a tie, it's a pretend tie, but you do tie that bit. And a beautiful skirt, really lovely skirt on it. I wouldn't know whether it's a, I don't think it's a half circle skirt, I'm not sure. And it is cut on the bias, so it does fall really beautifully. My favourite bit of all, it has pockets. Can't go wrong in pockets in my view. In a summer dress you've got to have a pocket. And the zip down the back, it has an invisible zip down the back, which I thought I'd done quite a good job of that because I had a bit of a faff with that zip. I mean, it might just be me, but I cannot stand putting zips in dresses. I absolutely hate putting zips in. Is it just dresses, or is it, no, just putting zips in generally? I don't like putting zips in. And I think if it was just a case of being able to put the zip straight in, I would be fine. But I've never had a situation where I could just put the zip straight in. I will baste it in first and then check the sizing, and it always has to be adjusted for me. So yeah, I had a bit of a faff with that. But yeah, generally that's the gist of this dress. I mean, it has some beautiful little details where it's got, does have bust darts. It has gathers on the tie. So it has a gather there, and then it has the same gather on the other side, which is actually tucked in at the moment because that's the bit that goes through. There is a hole that you put the tie through there, and that side also has gathers. So yeah, both sides are gathered. They're both different pieces on the bodice, so you have to do them completely differently. So that is quite complicated. And I know that they did do a sew over it, sew along on their channel, so the YouTube channel, and you'll see that there's different gathers on each side, but also for the lining pieces, the different gathering as well. So you have to really pay attention to that bit. Well, if you take your time and you just look at it properly, like with me on the pattern pieces, I drew out the lining gathers in a different colour to the main bodice pieces, the gathering on the main bodice pieces, just so I knew, because when I first looked at it, it just looked awful. So well, once I'd actually paid attention to it and then gathered what I was meant to do, it looked fine. And I worked it out. So yeah, I will try this on in a minute just to show you what it looks like on. But what did I do with this? Now, I think I started off in a twirl that I made I think I did an 8. And then I started off with a 6, sorry, on the shoulders, and established that that was a little bit too tight around the arm side here. And it was just a little bit, I thought once that's bagged out, it's going to really cinch that in a little bit more, because I find that with bagging out something, it does make it shrink in just a tiny bit. I've made that mistake before where I've made a dress and it's fitted me perfectly and perhaps over fitted it and then put the bagging in, and then once that's in, it's just too tight. So little tip there. So yeah, and then I ended up doing an 8 on the top, a 9 for the bust, and then went down to a 10. Now, I think I probably could have just done an 8 from the shoulders down to the bust, because it does sit a little bit big, and I've had to take it in quite a lot with the zip on the back, just to get to fit. So I probably could have just done an 8, to be honest, for that, and then graded to the 10. I'm quite happy with the 10 being on the waist, because I do like it to have just a bit more room in the waist so I can eat and generally stuff my face. I like eating, so I don't want to feel like I can't eat anything. Yeah, and then I lifted the shoulder seams up. So once I'd known that I had to take that from a 6 to an 8, I found that once you added that extra fabric for the 8, it did make this sit a little bit lower. So the front crossover sat too low for me on the chest, and I found it also sat too low here on the underarm, and you can see my bra, so I just lifted it up by a centimetre. So in total it was a 2.5 centimetre seam allowance that I used on the shoulders, and I did that to the main bodice piece. And then what else did I do? I did take some off did I take anything off the bodice? No, I didn't take anything off the bodice length, so I just left that as it is because I felt it was quite short. And I like to lengthen my bodice pieces to be slightly longer than my bodice because I have a short body. I've said this in previous vlogs before. I have a little short body and long legs, so I want to balance that out by just lengthening the bodice slightly. So I left that as it is, and I think it's perfect on me. I really love it as it is. And now I didn't have enough fabric for the ties. It does tell you in the instructions or in the pattern to have a good 3.5 meters of fabric for this, and I thought, well, that's a bit weird. Why have I got to have so much fabric? But it's basically for the ties. So I didn't have enough fabric for getting these long ties out of the fabric, and they are really long ties. So I've had to botch them together basically. So you will see I have a seam going down there. So I think one tie was 2 pieces. Now I got one long piece out. I got one long piece out, but then the other side I had to do 2 pieces to get one tie. And then for the other tie, now this is the tie that's hidden slightly. And I knew that because it was going to be hidden, I could kind of botch it a bit more. So this one is, I think, in is it on 2 pieces? No, the one side is in 2 pieces, but I've got the seam to sit right inside here, there, so that when it goes through, you don't really notice it. And then the other side, the seam, annoyingly, is a bit more obvious because the pattern doesn't match. However, because you're wrapping it round the back, by the time it's got to this point where it's tying, you don't see it. So I was really lucky with that. But I would say if you haven't got enough fabric, just do that really. And if you've got a pattern that doesn't need matching, that's great. But I mean, if you have got a bit of a like that, just put it in the parts where you're not really going to see it. And that was just pure luck that worked out for me, because when I first looked at it, I thought, no, this is dreadful. It's going to look really bad, but it doesn't look that bad at all. Yeah, so I did take some off the length, and I can't remember how much I took off the length, but I think it was probably my usual, a good 5, maybe even 6 inches off the bottom, and I estimated it perfectly. When I tried it on, it is exactly the length I wanted it. I find out where I've put the piece of paper I've written that on. I will put it along the bottom of how much I took off the bottom of the skirt. And then when it came to stitching the bodice pieces to the skirt, it tells you to backstitch with the pockets on the top of the seam and on the bottom, just to give it some more stability. So when you're sewing that in, it just tells you just to do a little reverse there and then a little reverse there. But it doesn't tell you to do any of that extra stuff on the bodice pieces, which I think you perhaps need to do. So where you're stitching this in here, I'll get the tie out of the way. I'll show you again when I've got it on. It's probably easier actually if I put it on. But this overlaps here. Now the way that you're stitching that in, you have a little raw edge that's down here. Now if you don't stitch that in properly, that raw edge will stick up, and I've actually had to go over my seam allowance to get that to stay in and not showing. But what I did with that, when I went over that part there, when I was stitching the skirt to the bodice, I've gone over it a few times, back stitched and then forward and then back stitched and forward, just to make sure that it doesn't, because I think that's a weak point and it doesn't tell you in the instructions to do that, but I would suggest doing that. I've also done it as well, so there's a little hole here for your tie, and the bottom of that, where it meets the skirt, again, I thought was a weak point. I actually did a few hand stitches in it first so that it kept it closed, because my machine kept pushing it open, and I thought that was a bit annoying. So I did a few hand stitches, and then when I went over with the machine again, I did a reverse back over a couple of times, just to make sure that that doesn't, because it's a stress point, just shoving a big tie through it. I thought that's going to probably give, this is just from experience of doing wrap stuff, that, you know, something always goes on the wrap, and it's usually those points. So those are just little tips there. If you're doing the stress, I suggest maybe doing that as well. And then the back zip. Now the back zip I had just a complete nightmare with, because again, I find this with sew over it patterns, I'm not quite sure why. I've had it with a few of the dresses now. This back part here, right at the neck, is really gaping. So it doesn't sit right next to my body, it just sort of gapes back. Now I tried to take it in a little bit, but what I did was I just cinched it in, and then I just graded it all the way down to the waist where it does fit. But I then found that it was really tight across my shoulder blades, because I know I'm quite broad across this part here in my back, probably from doing all those chaturangas. Yeah, and that I found. I didn't know how to get round that, because obviously taking in so much fabric here, I couldn't really sort of grade it in back out again, if that made sense. So I had to then let it out again a little bit more, and I've just got to the point where this feels comfortable. So this does sit a little bit gapey at the back still, but not hugely. I don't think anyone's going to notice it, to be honest. It was probably just me being a bit picky, but it's not gaping as much as it was. Yeah, so I've just literally taken it in and graded downwards to taper back to the 1.5, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Yeah, and then the way that you do the lining is a little bit faffy on this as well. So these parts here down by the zip and underneath here, I'll show you, you have all the overlocking kind of just raw here. You overlock these parts. So unlike with most patterns where you tuck it under and you kind of conceal all that raw edge, you can't do that with the way that this is made. I assume it's because of this wrap detail that you've got. But you only stitch up to the dart. So this part here is all flapping and open. So all through there, let's take it off the hanger. This part here, when you're trying to put that zip in, this is all open with this bit flapping. Now I found that really annoying. I just found it really got in my way, and especially because I was trying to adjust it and it kept having to go back, take in a little bit more, pin it, base the zip in, all that kind of stuff. It just got really, it frayed loads. It just got on my nerves, and I just felt really irritated by that, to be honest. But it wasn't awful. It was fine. I mean, now it's been stitched in, and I mean, you just slip stitch that in down by the zip. I am going to do one side again, because I wasn't quite happy the way I've slip stitched it in. It's a silly thing really, but it's just not quite even on both sides. You probably can't see it. And then I also forgot to put my label in. I wanted to put in my little label from my Little Rosy Cheeks. I wanted to put this label in where it says "So Nice." I'm going to be able to see that writing on there. It's not going to focus. But I wanted to put that in, and I thought it would probably have been better if I'd done that before I'd done all my slip stitching. So I could have sewn it in and had invisible stitches on the other side. That makes sense. So I might undo that and do it again. But yeah, I found that to be a little bit annoying and a little bit faffy. But apart from that, all came together lovely. And again, I said in my previous vlog about the shoulder seams, that's a bit tricky. So what I've done is I've filmed me doing one side of that, because I know that they do it in the sew along. I've seen that they're in the sew along that for the Martha dress. Lisa does kind of go through it with you, but you don't see it from the actual fabric. You can't, the angle of the camera, you can't really see what she's doing. But anyway, I didn't know that she'd done that before I made this. So I did one side, thought it was very complicated, had me kind of like, oh, what am I doing? I think I might have done this wrong, but then I worked it out. So I filmed the other side so that you can see how that's done. So I'll add that on at the end of this video. So if you do have any issues with that part, just watch this and hopefully it will make sense. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it makes sense to you. But you know, it gives you just a little bit of an idea, I think, of what to do. So I'm going to go try this on now and show you what it looks like when I've got it on. Okay, so here is my Martha dress, which now I've got it on, I absolutely adore. I absolutely love this. I'll try and get the full length of the skirt in. If I stand back, you can see that's where it ends up, just underneath my knee, which I really love, and the lovely pockets, which I just adore. I love the pockets. And then the tie, I think you can either have the tie in any way you want it. I think I've put it in a bow, but I think you can just have it tied once and have it trailing down. It's quite a long tie. And the lovely crossover. Yeah, adore it. The only thing I had was, again, like the back, it's a little bit baggy around this part, but I'm being really picky because I don't think it looks that bad really. I just thought it was a little bit baggy here. Again, my sway back, and I mean, if in reality I could have probably taken those darts in a little bit more, but once you stitch that skirt in, there's no chance of unpicking it, no chance whatsoever. I was not going to unpick that, no chance. So I just thought I'll take it in at the zip. I have taken it in a little bit more here, like I say. And then the neck, it isn't too bad, but you can still see it just sits a little bit proud of the body. It just sits back a little bit. And I mean, I've taken that in as much as I can. I didn't want to take it in too much, like I say, it would have been just too tight across my shoulder blades here. So, I mean, I'm going to live with it. I don't think it looks that bad. And, you know, most of the time maybe I might have my hair down anyway, so you won't probably see it. But yeah, I love it. I really, really, really love it. I think it's a lovely pattern, actually. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. I love the gingham. But yeah, I love it. Absolutely adore it. I'm definitely going to wear it when the weather's better, when it's a bit sunnier. But yeah, I really, really love it. Really, just a lovely skirt. I love the way the skirt falls. It's just perfect. It's not too big. It's not too small, if that makes sense. It just seems perfect. Yeah, and I just think it's got lovely details on it. And I was a little bit concerned about this white lining, because I know that sometimes when I've tied it, the white lining does show, but actually if you've tied it properly, it shouldn't show. But yeah, I wouldn't have known what other colour to do, to be honest, because I didn't want to do a dark lining just in case it altered the kind of the effect of the pattern on the top half, whether would have been too dark. So I just chose white. But yeah, so apart from those little niggles just being a little bit tiny little bit baggy here, you know, but again, I always have that on most dresses because of the sway back thing. But yeah, I adore it. So there you go. So I will add that I had 2.5 meters of fabric to get this out of. Now I know, of course, I've shortened the skirt, and I obviously did need as much on that skirt. So if you are obviously taller than me, then you probably would need more than 2.5 meters. Like I said, in the pattern they suggest 3.5 meters. So if you want to get those ties out, and of course if you're tall, you're going to need a lot more fabric. But I mean, I squeezed it out of that 2.5 meters of fabric, and I had nothing left, just like tiny little scraps left. But I'm pleased because I love it when I can get to use all the fabric. I hate having waste fabric over. So yeah, I'm really chuffed. I was actually thinking of making a face mask actually, but I don't think I've got enough fabric to make a face mask, because I thought, well, if I make a matching face mask out and about, I will look really cool. But I didn't have enough. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else I can say about this pattern other than I love it, and I'm definitely going to make another one. Now that I've made it once, I'm probably going to do it slightly differently in terms of maybe just you taking it down to an 8 for the chest. But then having said that, I mean, I don't want it to be too tight across the back. So maybe keep it as an 8 on the front, and then take it to an 8 at the front and take it down slightly up, 9 on the back, if that makes sense. So making the back a little bit bigger than the front, essentially. Got there eventually. So yeah, I think I might do that, give that a go. And then yeah, other than that, I just adore it. I'm going to make another one. I don't know whether to try with viscose though. It might be, I would definitely say it's going to be challenging if you make this in viscose or anything that's really drapey. I know that Lisa Comfort said you can use a viscose, but you would have to stabilise these front pieces here with some stay tape. But generally I think it would be so tricky to get this out of a viscose or anything drapey. It would be extra challenging, and it was challenging enough in gingham. So, I don't think I'm going to attempt anything in drapey. I'm going to stick to a cotton. And I mean, like, as I said, the gingham just is beautiful for this pattern. I think it's just beautiful matching this material fabric for this pattern. So yeah, that's it. That's all I've got to say about it. So I've just finished my shoulder seam, and I thought this was a little bit tricky. So I thought I'll film the next one I do, the second half, so that you can see what I've done. And if you do struggle with that, then you can just refer to it if you need it. You might not need it. It might just be me that found this difficult. I'll do the other side and we can work out for what we're doing. So we've got to the point where we've just got that lining in to the bodice and you've understitched. So you would have understitched all down the front of your bodice, and you've done the armholes the same way. So you've got all that understitched, whereas this point now you've got this open bit where you had to leave that remaining open. I've just put my 2 lining pieces together, right sides together, 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters. Done the same for the bodice pieces, again right sides together. But then obviously you've got to finish off those raw edges. It tells you to pull those arm pieces the wrong side back out again through the front of the bodice. So just go through the front of the bodice, pull that through, and get it all the way out. So this is the tricky bit. You have to get out enough. So keep pulling it out. So the bodice will almost come through these arm pieces. And you've got to keep pulling it through. Keep pulling it through till you get to the point where you finished stitching originally. So you'll find your notches and the point where you finished. Oops, sorry. Just dropping it there. So you just got to keep pulling through. So essentially you're just pulling the bodice all the way through these arms. Can be a bit tricky. Okay, so there we have, I've probably pulled it through too much now. So there we have the stitching originally that I had. So I will now try and get those pieces to meet up. It's quite complicated, this, I must admit. Okay, so you've pulled it through, you've pulled through like that, and now you're going to take those the right sides together at where you finished stitching before. So that's why you've got to pull it through quite a lot to get to the other side. I'll just show you there. That's where I finished stitching previously, and I trimmed my seam allowance down just to that notch. This is where my next notch is and where I finished stitching, and I'm now going to start to pin that back together again. And just go along, pinning this all the way back along. So it takes a little bit of messing with, this one. So I'm going to get my shoulder seams matching. On my other one, I didn't quite get the shoulder seams matching perfectly, but at that time I was just more interested in actually getting it stitched in. I wasn't really paying attention to that. I don't think it really matters too much. No one's going to see it. We get to the other side. So again, there's the next notch where I finished stitching. Just put those two together. That's why it's important not to cut off the seam allowance of these remaining pieces that you don't stitch, so that you've still got seam allowance there to stitch it eventually. And I just like to make sure that those seam allowances are pinned down as well, so that when you sew them, that they're not going to flap about. Okay, so that's the one side done, and then you've got to do the other side. So again, flip it round, find where you stitched previously, and then start to get that to meet up. So again, you've got all the bodice inside. Sorry, I'm moving away from the camera, it's not good. You're trying to get that to all meet up, but that all bodice is inside, tucked in, so you've got to make sure that you don't catch that when you're stitching it. It's a little bit tricky. I suppose it's a little bit like when you're doing the burrito method of a bodice. I'm trying to just get that seam matching on my shoulders, and then again, that's where I originally had my stitching there, and I'm just going to pin that. Other side. Going to need a bit more pulling through this side, I think. I might redo these pens after. It's hard to look in the camera and then work out what you're doing. This is quite tricky, this. All those people that do sew-alongs, quite good at being able to do this. I suppose they have better equipment though than me. So now again, at that point there, I've got to get where I stitched before. Just needs a bit more pulling through, this one. Doesn't want to pull through. So that I can get that matching. So I've got all that pinned. Just getting this bodice through. It's a pain. It doesn't want to come through. Okay, so we've got a bit more room now. Okay, so then you've got this like a little sausage almost, where most of the bodice is in that arm or the shoulder seam. So now we've got to stitch that and make sure that you don't catch all that fabric that's inside there, which is quite tricky. But just take your time, go really slowly like I did, and just meeting up the stitching originally where you have your stitching lines. And then I'll come back and show you how it looks. Okay, so there you have, that's stitched. That was just absolute hell to do that one. That was just really difficult. I don't know why, I just had so much fabric in here Trying to push it out of the way was just awful. But this is essentially what you're ending up with once it's stitched. Just making sure that you've gone right up to your stitch line, reversed so it's all nicely secure, both sides. So yeah, you've got to just pull that straight back out again now. So you're going to make sure that it's not being stitched in. So fingers crossed, none of that bulk in there has been stitched in. Let's see. So you're going back under, pulling it right side out, and hey presto, you have your seam all neatly stitched in, and that's not too bad actually. Even though I had to unpin some of it along the way, I've still got those matching slightly. That's good. All looks nice. So that's now finished. I hope that's helped. I hope you've enjoyed this vlog today, and I shall be back next week with some more Friday sews. I will see if I can get another extra little video in as well of my June makes. But yeah, so hopefully I'll see you then, and thank you for watching, and hopefully you found this interesting. Give me the thumbs up if you did find it interesting and it's helped you in any way. And then also, if you are not subscribed, then please do subscribe. And again, have a lovely day, take care of yourselves, and as always, sending you love and light. Bye!